As night fell and the wind gently swept through the bamboo trees, a different community awoke in the ancient lands of Japan. This was a community where swords didn't clash, where war cries didn't echo. Instead, it was a world where discipline, patience, and serenity reigned. Today, I invite you to the calm and profound life of Japanese samurai. This is not a story of war. This is a journey through history that encourages you to sleep. Samurai were not merely warriors. They were people who awoke before sunrise, purifying their minds, listening to their breaths. They learned silence before the sword, balance before strength. At this hour of the night, as thoughts grow heavy, visualize the narrow stone streets of ancient Japan. Feel the faint scent of incense rising from between the wooden houses in your lungs. Imagine a samurai standing motionless in front of a temple. Imagine his armor heavy but his mind calm. For the samurai, the greatest struggle was not outside, but inside, with fear, anxiety, anger. That's why every day he would sit silently for hours, counting his breaths, slowing his heart. Throughout this video, I will take you on a journey far from the clang of swords, close to the tranquility of Zen gardens. Every word will flow slowly. Every scene will be calm and penetrate your soul. History, this time, will be told not to awaken you, but to lull you to sleep. Now relax your shoulders, rest your head on the pillow, slow your breathing, and step into the silent world of the samurai. As the sun slowly rose from behind the mountains, time seemed to slow down in the ancient lands of Japan. For the samurai, each day was not just a duty. It was a journey of discipline, balance, and inner exploration. Silence was their greatest teacher. They listened more than they spoke. They knew when to pause before acting. A samurai's morning routine began with calming his mind before drawing his sword, because only with a calm mind could the sword be held correctly. As the wind passed through the bamboo trees, the distant sound of temple bells could be heard. This sound was the rhythm of an unhurried Japan. For the samurai, power lay not in shouting or fighting, but in being able to control. Thinking 1,000 times before taking a step, pausing before taking a breath, finding inner peace before making a decision was important for samurai. At night, under the dim lights of wooden houses, samurai slowly shed the weight of the day. Armor was silently removed, sword carefully put back in its sheath, and the world turned a little slower. Everything in their lives was measured. Eating, talking, walking, seeking inner peace, even silence. This calm order was not only for becoming a warrior, it was for remaining human. And now, in this silent world, time is beginning to slow you down too. The lives of samurai were not spent solely on the battlefield. In fact, a large part of their days was spent in silence and repetition. They would wake up in the early morning. While the sun was still rising from behind the mountains, the interiors of the wooden houses would still be cool and dark. Before donning his armor, a samurai would sit motionless for a long time, paying attention to his breath. This was a daily activity to calm the mind. Even sword training was not noisy. The sound of sharp steel cutting through the air was like a short, soft hum. Every movement was measured. Every step was controlled and conscious. For samurai, discipline was not oppression. It was a path to peace. Repeating the same movement hundreds of times slowed the mind. Thoughts diminished, and the body and breath remained in harmony as a whole. As the days progressed, they would take silent walks in the gardens. Slow steps on the pebbles, the gentle swaying of bamboo leaves in the wind, the sound of birds in the distance. There was no rush for them in this world. It was as if it were a different world. Everything was slow, balanced, and calm. Samurai were not only warriors, they were also observers. They followed the rhythms of nature, making their own inner rhythm one with it. And when night approached, the weapons were laid to rest. Under the soft, dim light of the lamps, the wooden houses were enveloped in silence. This silence carries a peace that can still be felt even after centuries. As the sun slowly rose over Japan's mountainous region, a samurai's day began in silence. There was no haste, no frivolous movement. Every step, every breath, every glance was conscious. For samurai, life wasn't just about heroic tales. True strength lay in a daily routine, simple cleaning in the early morning hours, carefully cleaning swords, silently checking armor, and so on. A samurai would first discipline himself, because the way to achieve balance in the outside world was through the inner world. Their homes were simple, unpretentious, with few possessions and order. This simplicity didn't tire their minds. On the contrary, it slowed them down. A samurai would spend most of the morning meditating, reaching astral dimensions. First of all, he would sit quietly, focus on his breath, and allow thoughts to come and go. They didn't dwell on any of it. They didn't chase after any of it. This habit made them a powerful force not only in battles, but also in life. Because a calm mind finds a way in any situation. As the days progressed, the samurai would begin their sword training. At this, no shouting, no anger, just movements, slow and controlled. They conducted their training regularly and frequently in this way. Even as the swords glided through the air, a sense of peace prevailed. This wasn't war, but rather a search for balance. Much of their lives was built on balance. For the samurai, the sword wasn't just a weapon, it was a reflection of character. A disordered mind meant disordered act. That's why a large part of the day was spent in silence. They didn't speak unless there was a need to, because their silence was their most powerful teacher. As evening approached, the day slowly drew to a close. The samurai reflected on his deeds, acknowledged his mistakes, but never judged himself. For them, it was enough to be a little calmer each day than the day before. When night fell, as Japan's silent villages and temples were shrouded in darkness, the samurai would retire to rest. There was no sound except the gentle crackling of the fire or the wind passing through the bamboo. In this silence, the body relaxed, the mind slowed down, and sleep came naturally. For the samurai, sleep was not an escape, but rather a way to refresh and rejuvenate his body. He surrendered to the peace of the night so that he could wake up the next day in the same way. Now you too can remain in this tranquility. Let your breath slip, let your thoughts become heavy, and let that silent balance practiced by samurai for centuries lead you to sleep. Close your eyes and begin to embrace that unique peace. Samurai were not just warriors. Their lives were not solely about war. On the contrary, for them, life itself required discipline. Every day they began the new day with a silent rhythm, and they bid farewell to the day just as silently. Their lives began before sunrise and ended before sunrise. Their houses were simple structures woven with wood, paper, and the tones of nature. There was no noise. There was absolutely no haste. Every movement was conscious, every step slow. Before waking up to a new day, samurai would begin by calming their minds. They would take a deep breath, then another, and these spaced breathing routines would cleanse the mind of the burden of the new day. Because for a samurai, the greatest battle was the battle within oneself. Their breakfasts were simple. They were content with rice, soup, and sometimes a small vegetable, and they were grateful. Eating little, speaking concisely, being content with little, this simplicity was the most important part that lightened their spirits. Their training would begin during the day. Although sword training seemed harsh, it was actually carried out with rhythmic movement. It was like a dance. Every strike was measured, every stance was balanced. Disproportionate force was not used. But the lives of samurai were not just about swords. They practiced calligraphy, wrote poems, and observed nature. For a samurai, even the sound of the wind was instructive. The falling of a leaf taught them what patience was. In the evening, silence and tranquility enveloped the village. Lanterns were lit, shadows stretched out. The samurai reflected on their past day. They would learn from their mistakes, focus on purifying their thoughts, and quietly fall asleep. Falling asleep wasn't an escape, but a purification. Today was lived and over. Tomorrow, life would begin again with the same calmness. That's why the world of samurai wasn't noisy. On the contrary, it was deep, slow, and full of peace, just like it is now. Being a samurai wasn't just about being a warrior. It was much more than just wielding a sword. A samurai was, above all, a self-trained individual. They learned to live in silence, to wait, to pause, to breathe before thinking, to relax their minds. They would wake up before sunrise. While the inside of their wooden houses was still cold, they stood outside on the sacred ground. Samurais would kneel. No one was watching them. There was no enemy before them, nor a victory to be won, only their own inner voices. In these silent moments, samurais sharpened their minds, not their swords. Because, according to Japanese belief, if the mind is clouded, the sword becomes heavy. For samurais, fear wasn't an emotion to be suppressed. On the contrary, it had to be accepted. To recognize fear was to learn to live with it. Therefore, samurai training wasn't limited to the body alone. They practiced calligraphy. They watched the ink slowly flow across the paper. A brushstroke was as important as a sword stroke, because every line was a mirror of the mind. They walked in Zen. They observed the order among the pebbles, looked at the placement of the stones. Every stone was alive. Every space was meaningful to them. Space was also important in the lives of samurai. Moments without words, future times, hours spent doing nothing. It was in these moments that their souls rested. When night fell, under the dim light of paper lanterns, samurai were alone. While the wind rustled the bamboo leaves in the distance, the crackling sounds of the fire slowed down time. At those moments, the world became smaller. Only breath remained. Samurai also viewed sleep as a form of training, a deep, silent, and uninterrupted sleep. This was essential for mental clarity the next day. That's why they never rushed at night. When the mind slowed, now you too are in this silence. In the world of a samurai, there is no war here, no shouting, no haste, only the deep hum of the wind, the dim light of a lantern in the distance, and eyes slowly closing. You too, surrender your eyes to sleep just like a samurai. To think of samurai merely as sword-wielding warriors would be incomplete. For them, the real battles were not outside, but inside. In the silence of the night, time slows down for a samurai. The armor is removed, the sword is left against the wall. Only their breaths remain, and their thoughts. Samurai viewed calming the mind as a discipline, because an uncontrolled mind was more dangerous than even the sharpest sword. Therefore, meditation was like an ordinary form of worship in their lives. Samurai would sit silently, listen to their breaths, and allow thoughts to come and go. They didn't fight with thoughts. They allowed thoughts to pass. Just like a flowing river, it cannot be held back, it cannot be hindered. It was only observed. For a samurai, the night was not just a time for rest. The night was a time to restore balance. The burden of the day was left behind. Mental weights were loosened. The soul, not the body, was prepared for the next day. In this silence, the samurai would question themselves. Did I act rightly today? Were my words and actions consistent? Did I protect my honor? Did I protect my dignity? These questions weren't harsh. There was no judgmental voice, only an observant conscience. In samurai philosophy, perfection wasn't important. Maintaining balance was. Mistakes could be made, but one wouldn't dwell on the same mistake. Just like thoughts, mistakes were temporary. That's why samurai fell into a deep sleep at night, because there were no regrets weighing down the mind. Everything was accepted as it was. Now you can do this too. You can let go of today. You can allow your mind to slow down. You can allow your body to relax, just like a samurai warrior does in the silence of the middle of the night. As night fell, and the lights in the mountainous villages of Japan went out one by one, the silence deepened in the world of the samurai. This silence was not merely the absence of outside sounds. It was a moment when the mind slowly calmed and thoughts settled. For the samurai, discipline was a path that existed not only on the battlefield, but in every moment of daily life. How they walked, how they sat, even how they breathed, were all part of this path. At the end of the day, weapons were put away, and armor was silently removed. All that remained was a body that bore the weariness of the day but remained vigorous. At this hour, samurai usually sat in simple rooms on their distinctive cushions, remaining silent with patience and serenity. There were no decorations on the walls, no ostentation at all, only wooden paper doors and a dim lantern light. This simplicity also simplified the mind. Breathing slows, shoulders relax, thoughts drift away, one by one from the events of the day. The samurai didn't dwell on past mistakes or the uncertainty of tomorrow. For that moment, only that moment existed, a state of silent awareness. This calmness was the samurai's, because true strength came not from always moving, but from being able to stand strong. As the night wind gently blew through the bamboo trees, the silence was echoed in the outside world. Even the faint sound of a bell from a distant temple signaled that time had slowed down. These moments were like a transition just before sleep. The mind was awake, but could no longer resist. The body was now ready to rest. For samurai, sleep was not an escape. It was a reset of the soul. The whiteness and transparency of the next day were prepared in this calm of the night. And now, you too can slowly release your thoughts within this silence. Just like a samurai, without rushing, without forcing anything, you can close your eyes and prepare yourself for sleep. As the day slowly drew to a close, the silence deepened in the mountain villages of Japan. For the samurai, night was not merely a time for rest. It was an activity of releasing the burden of the day from the mind. As the sun retreated behind the horizon, small lanterns lit in front of the wooden houses cast a flickering light, and the wind passed almost in a whisper through the bamboo leaves. At this hour, the samurai would put down their swords, because true strength lay in knowing not to fight at that moment. Armor was removed, simple clothes were worn, and the responsibilities carried throughout the day were silently laid down. Breaths slowed, thoughts calmed. For a samurai, discipline was not only in movement, but also in rest. Evening meditation was for emptying the mind. Past mistakes were not dwelled upon, nor were the battles of tomorrow imagined. Only the present moment existed, and enveloped in the peace of the night. The cool air rising over the rice fields, accompanied by the crackling of the fire, weighed down their bodies. This weight wasn't weariness, but a safe surrender. Samurai never resisted the night. On the contrary, they adapted to the night. As time slowed, their heartbeats found the same rhythm. Each breath a little deeper, each breath a little calmer, and perhaps that's why samurai saw sleep not as an escape, but as a comfortable rest. Now you too, in this silent evening, can slowly and freely let your thoughts flow. Don't worry, the night carries you, everything is as it should be. In the calmest moments of the night, when everything slows down, in the world of samurai it was no longer swords that spoke, but thoughts. After a long journey, for a samurai the real victory was not outside, the real victory was the victory won within oneself. The silence was no longer an emptiness, it was a space to rest, to take refuge. When a samurai sheathed his sword at sunset, his mind also stopped at the same time. Past battles, future anxieties slowly dissolved. Only breaths remained, deep, calm, rhythmic in this way. In Japanese tradition, true power did not make noise. It did not show off. It simply existed silently, just like the night. In the stone courtyard of a temple, as the wind passed through the bamboo, the samurai sat motionless. They closed their eyes, because the outside world was no longer what they needed to look at. In these moments, time stretched on. Minutes gave way to hours. The mind slows, the body relaxes, the weight on the shoulders is imperceptibly dropped to the ground. One of the hard lessons the samurai learned is this: everything passes. Victory, defeat, fear, and this awareness soothes the soul. There is no longer any need to hold on to anything by force. If you are listening to this sound right now, you are also in the same silence. The weight of the day was slowly dissolving. Your breathing is more regular, nights when thoughts are softer. Samurai did not make battle plans at night. Nights were like a means of restoring the soul, because a rested mind is the strongest armor. Now you don't need to do anything. Just lend an ear and listen to the rest. Let this story stop thinking for you. If your eyelids are getting heavy, that's perfectly normal, because it's an invitation. It invites you to silence, to deep sleep. That's how night was in the world of samurai. Calm, safe, and peaceful. Time grew heavier, steps slowed. Thoughts, burdened by the day's weight, gradually fell to the ground. In the world of samurai, there was no hurry at this hour of the day. The sun had long since set behind the mountains, leaving only a soft twilight. The gentle breeze blowing between the wooden houses swayed the bamboo leaves softly. Everything was where it should be. In this world, silence was necessary. One did not speak loudly. Power lay in stillness. For a samurai, the greatest mastery was not in using the sword, but in knowing how not to use it. Just like the mind, not clinging to every thought, not following every voice. Imagine for a moment a temple bell rings in the distance, a single strike, then a long silence. This silence is not empty. On the contrary, it is a silence filled with calmness, balance, and acceptance. From the outside, the life of samurai seemed to be woven with discipline. But deep down, this discipline wasn't a necessity, it was a form of peace. The same rhythm every day, the same breath, the same calmness. That's how my mind worked too. When you find your rhythm, it never, on the contrary, it carries you. Now your body may be getting heavier. Your shoulders are relaxing. Your breath is slowing down imperceptibly. This was very natural, because this narrative isn't trying to take you anywhere. It's just allowing you to stay where you are, encouraging you to sleep. For samurai, night is not an end. It's the silent closing of the day. Nothing is forcibly stopped. Everything subsided on its own, just like thoughts. If you have thoughts passing through your mind, let them flow. Don't hold on. Don't chase. Just let them flow. This world is such a place to be able to exist without resistance, to be able to befriend silence, being able to accept slowness. Now, the door to sleep is opening. You're not going in yet. You're just waiting on the threshold. Soon everything will become even simpler. The sounds will fade, the sense of time will pass. And you, without doing anything, you will simply begin to rest. Get ready. Night has now completely fallen. The temple courtyards are silent. The wind whistles through the bamboo. In the distance, the light of a lantern flickers, then stops again. In the world of samurai, these hours are a moment when even thought ceases. Neither war nor journey nor the weight of time remains, only breath and stillness. Now you can surrender your mind to this silence. The stories of the past are now behind you. Tonight, let history lull you to sleep. Rest now, slow the night take you. Good night, sweet dreams.